Moving on to episode 4, Seiya and Isuzu immediately paid a visit to Latifa upon hearing the news that she had fainted. When they arrived, Latifa had already regained consciousness. She didn't want to worry anyone and explained that she had just felt a bit dizzy before fainting. While riding the elevator with Isuzu and Moffel, Seiya felt guilty for asking her to come out and revealing a tire, but Moffel disagreed, thinking that wasn't the cause. Nevertheless, such incidents seemed likely to continue. After that, Seiya and Isuzu were monitoring Moffel, Macaron, and Tirami as they entertained the children. Seiya was pleased to see the three of them motivated, and the number of visitors had increased thanks to a 30-yen promotion. Suddenly, they heard a rumbling noise in the distance, which turned out to be the sound of preschool children on a school trip to Amaburi. Moffel, Macaron, and Tirami were struggling to handle all the preschoolers, especially the mischievous ones. Seiya then invited Isuzu to help them, but for some reason, Isuzu seemed hesitant. This made Seiya curious, wondering if Isuzu didn't know how to entertain the visitors. Isuzu quickly denied it, stating that she was confident in entertaining the visitors. As Isuzu approached them, she was immediately swarmed by the unruly preschoolers and ended up overwhelmed. Following this, Isuzu and Seiya still had many things to oversee. Firstly, they needed to visit the marketing department to discuss the new guide map. They met with Toriken to discuss the matter. Toriken had already created 5 map designs, but all of them were rejected by Seiya. Seiya showed them how to create a map for the amusement park by adding more vibrant fonts and incorporating the 3 most famous Amaburi mascots. With these changes, the map design looked distinct and more appealing. Once the teaching was done, Seiya and Isuzu had to rush to their next destination. They went to the food department led by Niku. Food supplies in the warehouse were running low, and at this rate, they would run out of ingredients by next week. Their current food supplier couldn't accept additional orders. Isuzu suggested finding a new supplier, but without listening to her, Seiya already knew what to do. He immediately called the previous supplier who had offered them their services before. Next, they met with Ashi from the finance department. Ashi reported that there were some unnecessary expenses in the recent item list. Isuzu clarified that it referred to the corrected item list. Seiya quickly glanced at the document Isuzu was holding and immediately identified the items that weren't needed according to Ash. When Ashi confirmed it, Seiya asserted that all the items were necessary, and Ash could proceed as planned. Afterwards, they met with Wrench from the mechanical department. She complained about a pump that was on the verge of breaking down. Isuzu suggested contacting the manufacturer, but Seiya stated that they had enough money. He instructed Wrench to shut down the nearly broken pump and rely on the remaining 2 pumps. Isuzu felt that this could be dangerous in case of an emergency, but Seiya simply said they would deal with it if it happened. Next, they received a complaint about the lack of storage space for souvenirs. Seiya promptly provided the necessary permits to allow them to use an empty room for storage. Then, they received a complaint from Okuro about a malfunctioning security camera monitor. Surprisingly, Seiya was able to fix it by simply hitting it. After all the supervision, Seiya finally returned to his office. This time, he had to review documents and attend a meeting to discuss improving the quality of the performances. The meeting would be attended by Moffel, Macaron, and Tirami. Upon learning this, Seiya delegated the meeting to Isuzu. He felt tired and had no energy left to argue with the 3 of them. Before Isuzu left, Seiya asked her to handle the task delicately, without forcing it. For some reason, Isuzu's face turned sour when he said that. Shortly after, 4 fairies from Elementario came to Seiya's office. They wanted to discuss a somewhat complicated issue. If it was indeed complicated, Seiya told them to talk to Isuzu because he was currently busy. However, they said they couldn't discuss this matter in front of Isuzu. They were unsure where to begin. Kobali then suggested that Seiya see it for himself in person. Feeling resigned, Seiya agreed to accompany them. Seiya and the 4 fairies were observing Isuzu. She was currently listening to Moffel's complaint about his nearly broken toy gun. Moffel asked Isuzu to approve the purchase of a new one. However, Isuzu immediately declined due to the current budget constraints. Moffel remained adamant, stating that the audience would be disappointed if his gun remained in this condition. Isuzu continued to refuse and even threatened Moffel with her own gun. Seiya couldn't believe such an incident was happening. After that, Isuzu went to see Macaron, who complained about his accordion being damaged. Macaron wanted to buy a new musical instrument. Like before, Isuzu refused and instructed him to use another musical instrument. Once again, Isuzu threatened Moffel with her gun. Next, she met with Tirami. Initially, Tirami mistakenly pulled out an inappropriate object, which prompted Isuzu to shoot him without hesitation. It turned out that Tirami was complaining about his broken flower robot. Again, Isuzu declined his request while brandishing her weapon. Suddenly, Isuzu approached Saya and the four fairies who were secretly observing her. Saya didn't want to involve the four fairies, so he invited Isuzu to have a one-on-one conversation. Saya reminded her that she needed to handle it delicately, to try to communicate with them instead of trying to dominate them. Isuzu mentioned that Saya sometimes tried to dominate as well. Saya admitted to it, but he managed to win their hearts. At present, Isuzu was Saya's secretary, and he couldn't let her bear the burden like this. Isuzu was not happy about being seen as a burden. If that was the case, she didn't know what she should do to improve it. Saya felt somewhat guilty when he saw Isuzu's expression. Then, Isuzu left without saying anything. The next day, Saya visited Latifa again. When he entered her room, he didn't expect that Latifa was in the midst of changing her clothes. Latifa thought that Isuzu had entered the room. After finishing changing, Latifa apologized. Saya had come to check on Latifa's condition. Fortunately, she was feeling better and wanted to go outside for some fresh air. Coincidentally, Latifa wanted to take Saya somewhere. She took him to ride the Ferris wheel together. Latifa had wanted to ride it with Saya for a long time. For some reason, Saya had been feeling tense and uneasy since earlier. Latifa became worried about his behavior and suspected whether he was afraid of heights. When asked, Saya immediately denied it. However, when the Ferris wheel they were on swayed slightly, Saya felt weak with fear. Finally, he admitted that he was indeed afraid of heights. Latifa tried to calm him down by stroking his head. Saya asked Latifa to keep this a secret. Latifa agreed but thought Isuzu should know as well. Ironically, Saya didn't want Isuzu to find out. Suddenly, Saya recalled a vague memory showing Latifa's face. He asked if they had met before. However, Latifa replied that she didn't remember. The next day, heavy rain poured down. Saya was currently at school. He was consistently ignored by Isuzu whenever they crossed paths. Even during the journey to Amaburi, they kept their distance from each other. While at the park, Wrench suddenly ran in a panic to ask for help. There was a malfunctioning pump that could cause problems in this heavy rain. It could potentially flood the underground facilities. Saya wondered why the pump had to stop at this moment. Wrench had already reported that the pump was nearly broken, but she had only told him to rely on the remaining two pumps. Saya thought hard about what to do but panicked and couldn't make a decision. Suddenly, Isuzu, who had just arrived after changing her uniform, offered a solution. They would establish a command center to instruct others to remove the water. Isuzu then communicated via phone from the meeting room. She ordered the placement of firefighting pumps in critical locations. Before the pumps arrived, they had to remove the water with buckets. At the same time, Isuzu instructed them to place sandbags to prevent more water from coming in. When the pumps were in place, they immediately started pumping out the water. After commanding so many locations over the phone, the rain subsided and the previously stopped pump started running again. Wrench, the head of the mechanical department, was highly impressed by Isuzu's performance. Saya also smiled proudly as he watched Isuzu. Saya and Isuzu were now in the underground room to assess the situation. Suddenly, Isuzu stated that she actually had no issue with Saya. Instead, she felt that the problem lay with herself. Before Saya came here, Isuzu was the manager of this park. She was just a soldier who could only command her subordinates. Isuzu revealed that she was a royal soldier and born into a military family. She was accustomed to following orders without question, even though she came here because she was ordered to restore the park's former glory. From the beginning, Isuzu knew she was not suited for this mission. Despite that, she wanted to fulfill their expectations. Unfortunately, she had failed in her mission and didn't know how to face that reality. She stated that all the employees hated her. Saya then revealed that he had also failed. Unexpectedly, Saya confessed that he was afraid of heights. When he was at the peak of his fame as a child actor, he suddenly developed a fear of heights. Like Isuzu, Saya didn't want to disappoint his family and others. In reality, that wasn't the main cause, but the point was that such things were normal in life. After that, they left the underground room. Above ground, Isuzu was greeted by all the employees who thanked her for her hard work. From this scene, Saya reassured Isuzu that she was not hated by the employees. Isuzu was on the verge of tears upon hearing this. Suddenly, she changed the subject by discussing Saya's story of riding the Ferris wheel with Latifa. Isuzu then asked if Saya was not afraid. Saya just blushed and didn't want to answer. At the end of the episode, a creature descended from the sky towards the area around Amaburi. The creature had sharp teeth and fierce eyes like a dragon.